Hey, welcome to my channel. In today's video, we're going to make these CrossFit Jump Boxes that are stackable out of some sheets of plywood and 2x4s. This project is made from 2 sheets of 3/4 inch plywood and 1 2x4. I figured out the layout prior to going to the Home Depot and then had them cut it down to size on the panel saw to save me some cutting and make it easier to transport. Once I got it to my shop, I cleaned up the edges because their saw typically leaves a pretty rough cut, and then cut the rest of the pieces down to size. Total, there are, obviously it's a square box, so 6 sides per, so a total of 18 pieces for the 3 boxes that'll all be stacked together. The next step was to put handles on the sides of the boxes. Created a template on a piece of hardboard, traced them out onto the side panels, used the drill press to make holes near the lines that I traced, and then open up the holes with a jigsaw. Now these are just a rough cut. After these were cut, I clamped the template back into place, lining it up with the pencil marks I had made before, and then used a flush trim bit on my router to make a nice clean smooth edge and a consistent hole size for those handles. The largest size box had 4 handles, the medium 2, and then the smallest top box only had 1 handle. Once the handles were cut, I marked the edges all the way around 3/4 of an inch in that I could use as a reference line for depth of cut. I set up the fence on my bandsaw to get the dimensions consistent on all of the boards that I was cutting. Just set the different depths and just worked my way through all of the boards. Once that was done, I came back and cut in from one side and then the other to remove the material between those 2 cuts, and essentially just setting this up to have a box joint on all of these edges of the jump boxes. Ended up with a lot of door stops from cutting those pieces. Once everything was cut, I dry fit together to make sure that everything was going to work, and when I was happy with that, I proceeded to glue in some corner blocks. I made the corner blocks by cutting down a 2x4 into 3.5 inch lengths and then gluing 2 pieces together. I tacked them all together with a nail gun so I didn't have to wait for the glue to dry, and could glue them to the tops and bottoms right away without worrying about them slipping around. I just pretty much glued and clamped them onto the corners of the top and bottom of each piece, and then let those dry for 24 hours. With the blocks dry, it was time to put everything together. So proceeded to glue each of the pieces. Had a silicone bristle brush on the end of my glue bottle. Really helped to spread that glue around to make sure it was in all the corners and all the edges. The reason I went with this style of box joint on all of the edges was just to make a really strong joint between each of the boards. All that surface area really makes for a strong bond, and the piece really locks together and isn't going anywhere once it dries. To avoid having any gaps, I used a lot of clamps to really force the surfaces together. I ended up using almost every clamp in my shop on each box. After everything dried for 24 hours, came back with a belt sander, sanded all the tabs flush to the top surface of the boards. Used some wood filler to fill in any voids that were there, as well as some of the chips around the edges that were a result of cutting the boards on the table saw crosscut. So did this for all 3 of the boxes, and then let the wood filler dry. Came back, gave it another sanding just to make sure everything was nice and smooth. Then it was time to drill the holes for the pegs on the corners of each of the boxes. Used an 1.5 inch Bosner bit to drill those roughly 2.25 inches deep. That would accommodate the 4-inch pin that would go between the 2 boxes. When I was doing this, I did run into a couple voids on the plywood, so came back, removed the top material, and then just filled in and re-drilled those holes. With that done, I loaded a roundover bit into my router and came around and cleaned up all of the edges of the boxes as well as the edges of the holes to allow easy pin removal in and out of the holes, and then just have a nice soft edge. I made the corner pins from a 1.25 inch diameter dowel. Just cut that down into 4-inch lengths and then rounded over the ends. A little bit of extra tolerance there, so if the holes don't line up exactly, it gives you some wiggle room, and then it allows the pins to slide in and out of the holes easily. The design allows jump heights from 6 to 36 inches by either using boxes individually or stacking them in different configurations. With the boxes built, I did a lot of product testing just to make sure that it would meet up to the challenge of demanding customers. I'd love any feedback you may want to share, so throw it down in the comments below. If you like this video, please hit that thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more, hit that subscribe and the little bell. You'll get notifications the next time I have something come out.
I pressed it. Start jumping.
Can you see my head? Show my head. Can you see my head in it?
Good. You'll see your head the whole time.
Life is what you make it. Make something great.